Sometimes, a simple act of kindness can lead you into a nightmare. That's what many truckers say about the phantom passenger of Interstate 90. It was a cold, foggy night when Dave, an experienced trucker, found himself driving down the long, empty stretch of I-90. He had been on the road for hours, the darkness pressing in on all sides, when he saw here a lone figure standing by the side of the road, her thumb out asking for a ride. She was young, dressed in a light coat that looked too thin for the weather. Dave hesitated. He knew the story every trucker did. But she looked desperate, and the road was deserted. Against his better judgment, he pulled over and opened the door. "Where you headed?" Dave asked. She gave him a small smile, her voice barely a whisper. "Just down the road a bit." Something about her seemed off, but Dave couldn't quite place it. As they drove, she said little, staring out the window as the fog thickened around them. The silence between them grew heavier with every mile, and a sense of unease settled in Dave's chest. After a while, he glanced over at her, ready to make small talk, but his words died in his throat. She was gone. His heart skipped a beat. Dave pulled the truck to the side of the road and jumped out, frantically searching the cab. She couldn't have just vanished, but there was no trace of her, no sign that anyone had ever been there. His mind raced. Had he imagined it? But he remembered her cold, pale face, her soft voice. She had been real, or had shaken. Dave got back into his truck and continued driving, his eyes flicking nervously to the passenger seat. The fog had thickened, making it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. His thoughts kept returning to the stories he'd heard over the years about the phantom passenger. The ghostly hitchhiker who appeared on I-90, asking for a ride only to disappear without a trace. Some said she was the spirit of a young woman who had died in a car accident on that very road. Others claimed she was a warning, a harbinger of doom for those who picked her up. Dave had always dismissed those stories as nothing more than trucker folklore, but now he wasn't so sure. By the time he reached the next truck stop, the sun was beginning to rise. Dave parked his rig and sat there for a long time, staring at the empty passenger seat. He couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just encountered something beyond explanation. He wasn't the first trucker to pick up the phantom passenger, and he wouldn't be the last. But after that night, Dave never stopped for hitchhikers on I-90 again. Because out there, on that lonely stretch of road, the line between the living and the dead is far too thin. And if you're ever driving down I-90 on a foggy night, keep your doors locked and your eyes on the road. You never know what you might pick up. The open road is a place of freedom, but on Route 66, it can quickly become a highway to fear. It was supposed to be a routine drive for Mike, a seasoned trucker with years of experience under his belt. He knew every curve of Route 66, every mile marker. But on this night, the familiar roads took a terrifying turn. As he drove through the desert, the only light coming from his headlights, he saw an old, battered rig barreling down the highway, heading straight toward him. Mike honked his horn, flashing his lights, but the truck didn't slow down. It didn't even swerve. Panic set in as Mike pulled to the side of the road, barely avoiding a collision. The other truck sped past him, the wind from its wake shaking his cap. But when he looked in his side mirror, what he saw made his blood run cold. The truck had no driver. The cab was completely empty. Mike sat there, frozen in disbelief. He had heard stories from other truckers, legends of a ghostly rig that haunted Route 66. They called it the Ghost Rig, a driverless truck cursed to roam the highway further, striking fear into anyone who crossed its path. Mike had always dismissed the tales as just that, stories. But now, he wasn't so sure. He decided to keep driving, hoping to leave the eerie encounter behind. But a few miles down the road, the headlights reappeared, this time in his rearview mirror. The ghost rig was following him, its lights growing brighter, closer. Mike's heart pounded as he pushed his truck to its limits, trying to outrun whatever was chasing him. But no matter how fast he went, the ghost rig stayed right behind him, its engine roaring like a beast in the night. He could feel it getting closer, the air around him growing colder, the dread creeping into his bones. Just when he thought he couldn't take it anymore, the lights vanished. The ghost rig was gone as quickly as it had appeared, leaving Mike alone on the dark, empty highway. He pulled over, trying to catch his breath, his hands shaking on the wheel. Mike made it to his destination, but the experience left him shaken. He shared his story with the other truckers at the next rest stop, and they all nodded, understanding in their eyes. The ghost rig was real, they told him. Some truckers were lucky enough to see it and live to tell the tale, but others weren't so fortunate. Now, Mike avoids Route 66 at night, because out there, in the darkness, the ghost rig is still roaming, searching for its next victim. And if you're ever driving down that lonely road, be careful because the ghost rig might just find you. Sometimes, a routine call can lead you straight into the unknown. It was late when Jake, a veteran trucker, received an unexpected call from dispatch. The voice on the other end was muffled, almost static-filled, as it gave him the details of a New York urgent delivery that couldn't wait until morning. The location was remote, deep in the backroads, and the cargo, a mystery. Jake was no stranger to odd jobs, but something about this one felt off. The address didn't show up on his GPS, and the instructions were vague at best. But the money was good, and Jake wasn't one to turn down work. He loaded up his rig and set off into the night, the silence of the road pressing in on him. The further he drove, the more isolated he felt. The towns grew smaller, the roads narrow, until he was surrounded by nothing but darkness and the endless stretch of highway. His headlights barely cut through the thick fog that had settled in, making it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. As he drove, the radio crackled to life, but the voice on the other end was nothing more than distorted whispers impossible to understand. Jake tried to ignore it, but the unease in his gut grew stronger with each passing mile. Finally, he reached the destination, or what he thought was the destination. There was no sign, no lights, just a narrow dirt road leading into the woods. He hesitated for a moment, but then something strange happened. His truck's engine suddenly died, the headlights flickered, and the radio went silent. Jake's heart pounded as he tried to restart the engine, but it was dead. He was stranded in the middle of nowhere, with no cell signal and no way to contact dispatch. And that's when he saw them figures in the distance, just barely visible in the dim light. They were standing on the side of the road, watching him. He couldn't make out their faces, but he could feel their eyes on him. Cold, lifeless eyes. Panic set in. Jake knew he needed to get out of there, but his truck wouldn't budge. The figures started moving closer, their steps slow and deliberate. Jake's hands shook as he fumbled for his flashlight, but when he turned it on, the figures were gone. Vanished into the night like they were never there. Desperately, Jake tried the engine one more time. To his relief, it roared to life. He didn't waste a second, threw the truck into gear and sped away, leaving the eerie scene behind. He didn't stop driving until he was miles away, the fog finally lifting and the road becoming familiar once more. When he finally reached a truck stop, he contacted dispatch, but they had no record of the job, no record of the call. It was as if the whole thing had never happened. But Jake knew it had, and as he sat in the dimly lit diner, staring into his coffee, he couldn't shake the feeling that the call had come from somewhere beyond this world. A delivery that defied all logic and reality, leading him to the brink of madness. And to this day, Jake refuses to answer any calls that come after midnight, because he knows that somewhere out there, the road to nowhere is still waiting for him. Thanks for joining us on this spine-chilling journey into the unknown. If you enjoyed these eerie tales and spine-tingling stories, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Have your own creepy experiences or know a legend that needs to be told? Drop them in the comments or send us a message. And remember, the world is full of mysteries waiting to be uncovered. Stay curious, stay cautious, and until next time, keep your lights on and your eyes open. Sweet nightmares.